When the history of Western civilization is taught, everything pretty much begins with ancient Greece. Athens is the birthplace of democracy. But how much do you know about the origin story of democracy really? Of course, Athens didn't just spring forth as a fully formed democracy like namesake Pallas Athena yeeting herself out of Zeus's head. The history of Athens before the first attempt at democracy around 500 BCE is littered with tyrannical monarchs and periods of oligarchy. But this is precisely the point. Democracy, rule by the many, was created as a reaction to oligarchy and monarchy, rule by the few or rule by one. In his book, The Athenian Revolution, Josiah Ober points out that Athenian democracy was threatened, like all democracies, most especially ours today, by powerful elites who wanted to dominate the system for their own benefit. Yet, says Ober, exercise of collective power by the Athenian demos prevented elite political domination, and it was intended to do so. It's just like Michael Parenti said, democracy is a wonderful invention by the people of history to defend themselves from the power of the wealthy. This is why democracy exists. Democracy is a mechanism for people like you and me to keep the rich under control. Even after democracy took root in Athens, the city-state continued to swing back and forth between oligarchy and democracy for centuries. Just because a democracy is formed doesn't mean it stays that way. Aristotle was among the first to point out that just because you call a society a democracy doesn't necessarily make it one. I'm reminded of the story of Benjamin Franklin, strolling out of Independence Hall at the conclusion of the Constitutional Convention. Supposedly, a woman asked him, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" To which he replied, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." Have you ever asked yourself why we wouldn't be able to keep it? Because powerful interests will always seek to subvert democracy and use it to protect their power and privilege. Fun fact, the golden age of Athenian democracy really only lasted about 50 years. Aristotle, writing in the 4th century BCE, noted the inextricable link between oligarchy and inequality. He believed that having a democracy meant greater equality. In an oligarchy, the opposite was true. In the Politics, Aristotle said, the oligarchs think that superiority on one point, in their case wealth, meant superiority on all. The Democrats believe that equality in one respect, for instance that of free birth, means equality all around. When the few are in charge, there's a tendency towards inequality, because the few are looking out for themselves. When the many are in charge, they look out for themselves too, but the benefits are much more diffuse, because there are more people involved. This is the genius of democracy. Talking again about ancient Athens, Ober explains that the rich, as a class, have one overriding goal: preserving hierarchy. The rich are on top, and they want to stay on top. That means that the rich are intolerant of equality and freedom, and actively seek to dominate those with less social status. If a rich person only has as much power as you or me, what's the point? Individually, ordinary Athenians were much too weak to stand up against the violence of the powerful elite. But acting collectively in defense of the laws and customs of the democratic order, the demos was indeed powerful enough to force the elite to recognize the dignity of each citizen, and powerful enough to discipline any of those who dared step out of line. This is the essence of collective power. By ourselves, we are too weak to challenge the richest and most powerful elements in our society. But together, we can do anything. Our collective strength can overpower any tyranny, great or small. This is why the rich, and even the American political class, who supposedly represent us, live in constant fear of true democracy. To promote the will of the majority is derided as populism. To do what's popular, what the majority wants, has a negative connotation in our society. Is this not a clue that something has gone wrong? I'll answer my own question and say yes. Tomorrow, we'll examine how progressive taxation was what made Athenian democracy possible. In the meantime, please like, follow, favorite, and subscribe to my free Substack. Let's make them pay.